In a world dominated by capitalism, the fact is war's not about nationalism or what television tells you to believe in. It ain't about security, it's not about freedom. It's about conquering resources, expanding an empire that's corporate, so industrial profits remain hoarded. A few rich elite people are rewarded. These individuals don't report to the government cause it's a revolving door where laws and policies are basically forged to benefit the rich while the poor are ignored. And to understand this is important. Out of war, a small group makes a fortune. Regardless of its inhumanity, it's actually wanted by industry cause it's the most lucrative thing that can happen. And international bankers always cash in, forcing countries to borrow more and more money just to support their wars. The bottom line is more profit is made the longer that a war can be sustained. They're supposed to be long and go on, and believe it or not, they're not meant to be won. Look at history, you'll see events are staged within the government, then someone else is blamed. Public perception is manipulated to support agendas that before we were against. This is all done through the mass media, cause people believe what TV feeds to us. There's no real enemy in a war on terror, so what that means is it can go on forever.
Men do not easily assume the task of opposing their government's policy, especially in time of war.
I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
What if war and preparation for war is a racket? What if the American people woke up and understood that the official reasons for going to war are almost always based on lies and promoted by war propaganda in order to serve special interests?
At the time that World War II began, Franklin Roosevelt was the U.S. president, and his family were bankers who wanted in the war because for them nothing else could make them profit more. The plan was to provoke the Japanese to fire the first shot and become the enemy. So Roosevelt did everything he could to spark anger, supporting China, Japan's enemy neighbor. And several days before Pearl Harbor was hit, the president was told of oncoming battleships by Australian intelligence, but he ignored this, resulting in the death of 2,400 soldiers. 80% of the public was against going to war just before this event. Then 1 million men volunteered for action. This was no sneak attack, it was allowed to happen. And when the Vietnam War began, the president of the States was Lyndon Johnson. Again, the US knew it could make a profit if they had an excuse to enter the conflict. In 1964, they alleged Vietnamese boats attacked 2 US ships. This apparently occurred in the Gulf of Tonkin. It's the reason why their military was called in. There's one problem, however. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara spoke out years later and stated this attack never occurred in the first place. It was a mistake, it was a complete lie. Over 3 million people died, and this is not a conspiracy thing they're trying to hide. You can read it for yourself, it's all declassified.
Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists.
Of course we're after Saddam Hussein, bin Laden. You know, one of the hardest parts of my job is to connect Iraq to the war on terror.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad.
The main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. Turns out he didn't. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
Did you know, in order to gain power, Hitler burned down his own Parliament Tower? Then he blamed terrorists for the attack, and within weeks passed the Enabling Act. This destroyed the German Constitution. When it came to rights, people had to lose them and support his program of war and tyranny, all deemed necessary for homeland security. Sounds like something else. It's interesting how history repeats itself. Makes you wonder if 9/11 may have been planned to jumpstart wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Terrorism's not the threat that we're led to believe. It won't cause our death. It's just propaganda used to make you afraid so the government can go to war and take our rights away. Dick Cheney, the vice president, was also the CEO of Halliburton, and that's the same company that got contracts worth billions of dollars to rebuild Iraq. This is why the Middle East was invaded, so they could steal the oil and dominate it, establish permanent military bases to be used against other oil-bearing nations. In terms of profit for the elite, see death and destruction's a positive thing, and the global monopolies what they seek over the energy resources that we all need. It's no different than the...
I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right.